I can't find out the fade out button. I can't find where to fade the track out. I'm just gonna do that and see if that helps. Hey folks, how you doing? Nick Jennison. It is Monday. We're doing the thing that we do on Mondays, which is hang out and talk about the guitar. It is, of course, the Monday Guitar Show. Welcome aboard. We're down here in the studio shooting some content for you guys. Specifically, we're doing a brand new series that I can't tell you too much about, but the onus, let's say, is that the right word? Or the central conceit of the series is that we're taking some solos that you may have already learned, songs that you may have already learned from the classic albums series, and I'm teaching you how to apply parts of these solos into your own playing. I won't tell you any more than that. It's a lot of fun. That's going to be coming to you guys very, very soon. If you're new here, you're wondering what's going on, welcome. My name's Nick. We do this every Monday. We hang around, we chat about the guitar with the objective of making you, dear viewer, a slightly better guitar player when you leave us than you were when you arrived. And we are continuing our discussion today on the subject of scales, specifically on fretboard visualization and scale memorization, how you can learn your guitar's fretboard. Because we did a stream on this last week and it seemed to go over pretty well with a bunch of you guys. You seem to really have a great reception to this, and I think a lot of you had some light bulb moments, which made me really happy. So we're going to continue this discussion today and see if we can carry on that thread of kind of improving your ability to see the guitar's neck. Now, before we go any further with that, I want to quickly remind you that today's stream is, of course, brought to you by licklibrary.com. Go to licklibrary.com for all of your guitar lesson-related needs, including today's featured course, which is the Guitar Fretboard Freedom Master Plan. That's a course of mine where you can go and get all sorts of information that is just like the stuff we're talking about today, only expanded beyond your wildest dreams. You want to learn your fretboard? I think that is the place to go. And while we're on, don't forget that we're also brought to you by Guitar Interactive Magazine. Go to guitarinteractivemagazine.com for news, reviews, interviews. We've just dropped a new mag. Joe Bonamassa is on the cover. It's a very, very cool issue. You're going to want to go and check that out after this stream. But before we go any further, let's say some hellos. We're also going to talk about the guitars we're playing, because this has become a regular feature. We're talking about the guitars that we're wielding on these streams. You guys that are watching, if you haven't got a guitar already, grab a guitar, you're gonna want one. I'm playing this today because it was kicking around in the studio and I felt like a challenge is probably the way I would put it. This is a vintage Thomas Blug Strat. Now this is a really great guitar. When I say challenge, I don't mean, oh God, what a terrible guitar. What I mean is this guitar is absolutely not the kind of guitar that I normally play, and it is not set up the way the guitars that I normally play are set up, but I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I think it sounds pretty cool, so we're going to stick with this today. Very cool signature guitar. We like this a lot, and it's also a little nod of the head to our friends at JHS who are winding up business. Can you believe that, right? That's big news in the guitar space. Vintage are, of course, a JHS-owned brand, and we love ourselves a bit of vintage and some JHS, so we're sorry to see those guys go, but we're looking forward to another year of working with them while they're still around. Anyway, that's a little bit on the downer, let's say. So let's talk about some guitars. I want to know from you guys what guitars you're playing. Let us know in the comments, and we're also going to read some comments, say some hellos. First through the door is our friend PJ, who says, "Hey up all, hope you're having a great day." I am having a great day. I'm having a lot of fun shooting some content. It's a nice sunny day too, which is always good. He's asking Mossy and how the baritone is treating him. Now, we love a baritone guitar here. I've got several in my collection at home. Big fan. Mossy just picked up a cool baritone, and he's having lots of fun with it. This is a guitar with some songs in it. Now, I'm really familiar with that feeling. For you guys who don't know, sometimes you pick up a guitar and it's got something in it that's going to make you want to write songs. It's going to make you want to compose some things, let's say. A guitar that inspires you. It's always a nice thing. So that's cool. Fog Cornish is here. We'll say some more quick hellos very quickly. Sacred Godslayer is in the house. Lovely to have you on board. Cranker Tom's tuning in with his Spark Mini and his Strat from somewhere nice in the world in the back of his camper van. Excellent. We like a bit of that. Helmet Strap is here. Thanks for joining us, man. He says, "Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to tonight's stream. Last week was a real eye-opener for me." Well, that, dear Helmet Strap, is why we've decided to continue this today. So that's one of my favorite things about these streams is we can be like super reactive with these lessons, where if there's something that just really strikes a chord with some of you guys, we can just decide to do another one. It's great fun. So this is why your comments are always valuable. If you guys are enjoying something, let us know, because we'll do more, right? And that makes me really, really happy. So Mark McNish is here. Great to have you on board. PJ says, "I'm hoping Nick will say learn by intervals, because that would mean whatever note I land on, I can decide where I want to take it next." Spoiler alert. Yes, in a nutshell, yes, but there is a little more to it than that, but that's basically where we're going here. Franz is here. Ergo Hog is tuning in. Response Audio is in the house. He's just got a Sonic Cake Pocket Master in the post a few minutes ago, but let us know if you're using it, man. Really interested to hear how that sounds. Master of Pockets, the Lost Metallica album. Steve Luth, or Loud, is in the house. Our friend Mo is tuning in, Mo Hofschneider, with a request to do some videos on Prince's guitar techniques. Now, I'm not the guy for that, I'll tell you that right up front, but that's definitely something that we should do, because really great guitar player, very underrated. I don't even know if we can say Prince is underrated anymore, because everybody seems to have cottoned on to the fact that Prince was a great guitar player. Is Prince properly rated now? Who knows? Anyway, our friend Andy Rocks the Cams is in the house. Thanks for joining us, man. It's great to have you on board. Catmandu 1962 is playing his 2013 Les Paul Traditional. I should be playing the Les Paul, shouldn't I, really, if we're playing Les Pauls, but maybe I'll grab it later. Nick's axe looks bluggish. It is, in fact, bluggish. You're absolutely right. Who else do we have? Dreams is in the house. Franz is playing his Strat Sunburst over his Boss JS10 Jam E-Band practice station. Those are really cool things. I like those a lot. Binary Surf is in the house. Let's make sure we say hello to everyone. Raphael or Raphael is here. We've got a cheap modded LTD from our friend, friend Ergo Hog. I was reading the next name. I apologize. Thomas is in the house. It's very important to know the guitar fretboard, but it's a little bit difficult. Well, we're going to see if we can fix that for you today. Vil S is tuning in. Great to see you. I'll have those pickups with a dummy coil just to find a parts caster where to put them. What he's referring to is the dummy coil in these pickups. So if I wind this up in a dirty sound that doesn't have a gate, you guys can probably hear there's a little bit of buzz, a little bit of hum, a little bit of buzz maybe. If I hit this, it goes away, which is really cool. Now that is the dummy coil that's built in here. Doesn't really affect the tone that much, but it's not a very buzzy room here, so we can kind of get away with gain and all that sort of stuff. I'm gonna make sure we haven't missed anyone. Double O Govern, Double O is in the house. Great to see you, great username as well. We like a bit of Govern. Steve Ford is in the house. Our friend Frank's tuning in. Crankerton, we've already said hello to, but hello again. Tone D Farkas is in the house. And finally, our friend Chris is tuning in with a white SG. Secret Godslayer is playing his PRS. We love a bit of that. Now, let's get into it, right? We're going to talk about fretboard visualization, scales, and how you may be doing them wrong. And we're going to start with something that is perhaps a little contentious, right? So I am of the opinion, truthfully, I am of the opinion that no great guitar player, I'm gonna hang my hat on this, no great guitar player, barring perhaps a few very rare exceptions, learns their guitar fretboard by memorizing large scale shapes. I'll say that again. I don't think anyone learns the fretboard by memorizing large scale shapes. I think when people do this, they're putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, which means that we have flipped what has, we've flipped the order of these things. So I'm personally of the opinion that these large scale shapes become useful and easy to visualize once you already have a grasp on how the guitar's fretboard works, and you have a little bit of an insight into the nature of scale construction, because then it's quite easy to see these shapes. Now, what am I talking about when I say these big shapes? Well, I'm talking about things like this, where you sit down, you learn A major, and you go, I must learn my A major scale, so I'm going to learn this. Or maybe I'll learn this. And I shall ascribe a shape to it. Or maybe I'll learn this one. And I shall ascribe a shape to it and all that sort of thing. Yes, these can be useful. They can be useful. Certainly once you know what you're doing, they are very useful tools. But I think, truthfully, it's just a bit too much information and not enough pattern for us guitar playing chimps, us apes that we are, to really make sense of. And this is why when I start guitar players, I do this face-to-face with students fairly regularly, and we do it on these streams all the time, and of course I publish courses on this subject. When I get guitar players thinking about this a slightly different way, we're not doing something different, we are learning the same shapes, we're just approaching them from a slightly different perspective. It always seems to trigger this lovely light bulb moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a slightly different perspective on this, and rather than examining scales as a big shape, we're going to examine them as a root note, and like we talked about in a previous stream, a series of intervals that orbit that root note. You can think about it like a solar system. So you have the sun in the middle, and then you have, we're not going to debate heliocentrism here. If anybody's kind of some strange opinion on that, that's fine. We're okay, we can still be friends. But you have the sun in the middle, and you have all of these planets that orbit. And this is a little bit like what we do with intervals. The only difference is the intervals don't move. Let me show you an example of this. So here is an example of a chord. And this chord is an E-shaped A chord. I'm guessing if you're at the point in your guitar playing journey where you're wanting to learn the fretboard, you'll probably know this. Our friend Govern, 00 has said the nucleus. That's another great way of putting it, right? So what we have here is we have an A note. We have another A note here, another A note here. When we play an A bar chord, usually what we think of is we think of one of these A's, and we think of this pattern, this shape, if you will, this pattern that produces an A chord. Now, the pattern is the chord, but it's not what makes it the chord. This is just the locations of the notes that we need to produce this chord, and they form a pattern, if that makes sense. So the pattern actually comes after the location of the notes, but the pattern is just an easy way for us to remember it, if that makes sense. Now, as we move this chord around, as we go to B flat and B and C and so on and so forth, the chord itself doesn't change. The chord remains the same, or rather the shape remains the same. The only thing that changes for us, from a guitar playing perspective, is which fret we're hanging this chord on. Now, in this instance, the fret that we're hanging the chord on is associated with the note, and the note in question is our root note. We think about the root note, and then we think about a shape to hang that chord on. Now, this is a concept that we use all the time in guitar playing. Other instruments don't do this so much. So for example, if you took a piano, if any of you who play piano, this is a great example of a different approach. In the piano, when we're playing the piano, we don't think necessarily of root note plus the shape. We have to know the names of the notes that are involved. We also have to associate one of several fingering shapes with that. But we need to know the names of the notes that are involved, which is why when we learn music theory, which is often taught through the lens of the piano, rather than the lens of the guitar, not saying it's wrong, it's absolutely correct, but there are many perspectives on this thing. Singers, again, different perspective. It's usually taught from the perspective of take a scale and learn the notes that are involved in the scale. Learn every one of those notes because every one of those notes is important. If you're playing a piano or you're playing a linear instrument like a saxophone, let's say, or a trumpet, these are very important things to know, especially for a transposing instrument. That's more important again. For the guitar, however, we tend to think of a root note, and while we jump to shape, what we're actually doing is we're thinking of root note and a series of notes that are related to that note. And it's the relationships between the root note and those other notes that makes up the scale, which is why we're able to make shapes like this. However, when we learn these huge, big shapes that encompass all 6 strings, what we end up trying to do is learn 3 different shapes simultaneously. And that is not super useful. Why 3? Because we have 3 root notes in any given scale. Sometimes 2, but usually 3, right? So we have a 1 here. This is our A major scale again. So we can think about that as a little shape. By the time we're here, we have another root note, and many of the same notes orbiting, but in slightly different shapes. Another one here, or perhaps here. And they all get a little bit confusing. So here's what we're going to do instead. We're going to take this idea of forming some small shapes, some small scale shapes, and constructing them into building blocks for larger scale shapes. And this is all going to be to do with scale formulae. Now, scale formulae is what goes into making the scale. It's what separates a major scale from a harmonic minor scale, from a minor pentatonic scale, from a whole tone scale, from a double dominant scale, from a Hungarian minor, whatever, right? You name it. The formula is the construction of this scale, and thinking about it in these terms makes it quite easy to visualize on the guitar, which is why this thought process is useful for guitar players. It can be less useful for other instruments, but it's very useful for guitar players because, let me show you an example very quickly, right? Let's take A major one more time, right? We are going to take this A major scale here. Now, the major scale formula is the default scale, because one of them has to be. Something has to be default, and in this case it's major scale, because we're playing mostly Western music here, and major scale is the most common scale in the Western system. We got one from Mal Riley. Says, when you were first learning the guitar, did you start with the caged shapes? The caged shapes were foisted upon me and they made no sense, right? They started to make a great deal of sense later, but when I was first figuring this stuff out, I tried, didn't make a great deal of sense. I started with the pentatonic and I started building out from the pentatonic scale because I could play stuff in the pentatonic scale. And it was quite easy for me to attach things to the pentatonic scale. And the cage system is a little like that in essence, but I couldn't make head nor tail of it, truthfully, when I was starting out. Now, different story. Although I wouldn't say I necessarily use it in the sense that I imagine myself as orbiting a C shape or orbiting an A shape, but it would be impossible for me to play the guitar and not use these shapes because that's just where they are. You know, that's just that would be like saying, you know, I move around the earth, but I don't use north. Well, how? Like you have to, because that's a direction, right? Does that make sense? Anyway, so moving on, right? We've got transparent in with the observation, learned it from Paul Gilbert, blocks in octaves. Paul's a wise man. So anyway, here is our major scale, and we're going to play it using a 3-note per string paradigm, which will require us, easy for me to say, to play a stretchy shape. And this is our first little contention when it comes to fingering shapes. So we're going to play 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9 on the lowest strings, and then fret number 6, and finally fret number 7 on the D string. So it's 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 6, 7. This gives us 8 notes in total, a root note and another root note. These notes orbit our root notes in this shape, and we'd refer to it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, or root, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, root. I said the major scale was default because everything we play is referenced to the major scale to give us some reference for where things might go. In the same way like time zones are referenced to Greenwich Mean Time, it had to be one of them. So, you know, why not, I don't know, why not like New York, or why not Lisbon or Beijing? I don't know. Greenwich is the one we chose. Anyway, so major scale, it's the one we picked. Now, every other scale we play is some derivation of this major scale. So if we take, for example, the common humble minor scale, the minor scale has a formula that reads 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, root. You can think about this as flat 3, flat 6, flat 7, because those are the ones that change. So we have this major scale. We can take the third of the major scale, which is the third note, and flatten it. Fourth, fifth, the sixth note, and flatten it. 7, the seventh note, and flattened it. And now what we have is we have this little chunk of music that we can think of as a minor scale, in this case, A minor. We can also think about this as A major. And this tells us some things about these scales. It tells us that the second is always 2 frets above the root on the same string. It tells us that the fourth is always on the same fret on the next string. The fifth is a power chord away, which we already knew because we know what power chords do. The sixth is 2 frets up from the fifth. The third is 2 frets up from the second. The seventh is 1 fret below our tonic, 1 fret below our root. And these will always be the case. So if we know where our root is, we can form these scales. And we can also make some inferences about things like the flat 7. The flat 7, always a tone, or 2 frets rather, below the root. So if I'm playing this here, I can find one here as well. Similarly, the flat third is 1 fret above the second, or 3 frets above the root. The major third, 4 frets above. Flat 6 is 3 frets up and 1 string, or 1 fret above the fifth. The major third, or major sixth, or raised sixth, is 1 string and 4 frets, or 2 frets above the fifth. Hopefully this is making sense, right? Because what this gives us is it then gives us the capacity to hang these scales on any octave, on any root note. We can hang this same series of intervals. Let me show you what this might look like. So we're going to take our major scale one more time. The major scale was this, if you remember. It's this business here. We played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're on 1. Well, if this is 1, and the distances are always the same, do you now know what to do with this root note? Can we play the same thing that we played down here? Yes, we can. There's our root note. We've moved to the first finger. Root, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. It's the same. Here's a change we have to make. When we get to the B string, we move everything up a fret. Why? Because the B string is tuned funny. So we have to compensate for when we cross from G to B. But apart from that, there's an A note. Compensate, there's another A. It is the same. Why is it the same? Because these notes are always these distances away from the root. They have to be, because it is their distance away from the root that makes them the note that they are. The second is the second because it's this distance away from the root, right? If it was a different distance away from the root, it would be a different note. If it was 1 fret above the root, it wouldn't be a second anymore. It would be a flat second. It's the distance that gives the note its value. And by thinking in these terms, we now have this ability to immediately formulate scales and populate them in our mind. We can see them just like appearing on the guitar's fretboard. Here's another A. One up here. Root, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. If we had enough strings, we could keep going. What we now have from this one simple shape is we now have this fretboard spanning scale. But we can also make some other inferences, because we got to the top and we've kind of run out of space. So what about if we find another A? What about this A? There's an A note. Well, from here, we could find a major third, one semitone below. Why is the major third one semitone and one fret below? Well, we know it is because it's here. So this and this become the same. And what do we do from here? Same thing. I compensate for the B string, and there it is. This is how this stuff really works. What it does is it teaches us to find root notes. We have our eye on the root note, and we imagine all of our notes populating around this root note, orbiting around the root note is a nice way of thinking about it. But you keep your eye on the closest root note. And when you move to a new octave, you just find the next root note. You go, where is the next root note? And we think about it from there. Now, there are other places we can find these shapes, and I'll show you them as we go, but I'm also going to show you how to change this up to form some other scales too. But you keep your eye on the nearest root note wherever you are, and it means you always have a little anchor point on the guitar's fretboard. You're keeping small little pieces of musical information in your mind rather than trying to imagine huge scale shapes and thinking about what's going on the low E string when you're busy playing the B string, because you're going, well, I'm in the 7th shape, so it must be this, or I'm in the Lydian shape. Helpful? Perhaps not. This is, again, a dichotomy that I draw here, which is the difference between correct and helpful or useful. Some things can be correct without necessarily being useful to us right now. It might be useful in another context, but right now it's not useful. Doesn't mean it's not correct. It's definitely correct. It just may not be useful for us at this point. And this is not to say that these big 3-note per string scale shapes or big caged scale shapes are not useful. They absolutely are useful, but I think they're only useful once you have a handle on how this sort of thing works. Another fringe benefit of this is, in addition to these approaches teaching you these small little shapes, it also gives you a perspective on where the root note is. And we talked last week about how important the root note is from a musical perspective. You play the root note to establish stability and to establish a point of rest in your improvisation or in your composition. And the other notes are various degrees of unrest from that root note, if that makes sense. So not only do we have a visualization of the scale, but we also have visualizations of the roles of each note within the scale, and that is invaluable because it makes you a more musical player. Now, let's go a little step further with this. So we found our root notes, now we want to do some stuff with them, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to quite quickly switch keys. We're going to quickly switch key to a C. Right, so key of C, let's go finding some stuff. First of all, let's find a C note. And I have loads of backing tracks in various modes in the key of C that we're gonna play over. So let's start with this C. We want to play C major. Where do we find C major? Well, we can start here. This is not the only place we can play it, it's just one of those places. There's my C, I know the major third is here. I know my 4th is here, my 5th is here, my 6th is here, my 7th is here. There is a tonic. If I need to move further, there's another C. I also know a C is here. And another C is here. These are definitely not the only place you can play them, and I'm not encouraging you just to have one shape in your vocabulary, but this is a good starting point. If I wanted to change this scale, let's say I wanted to change it from C major to C Lydian, all I need to do is know what the formula of C Lydian is. And C Lydian is a major scale, in this case in C, but with a raised 4, a sharpened 4. So what do we do with this information? We take the 4 and we sharpen it. What do we sharpen it by? 1 fret. So there's 4, there's C. 4 is 1 fret above the C. Sorry, 1 string on the same fret. Move it up by 1 fret, and now we get this. 1, 2, 3, sharp 4. 5, 6, 7, 1. 1, 2, 3, sharp 4. 5, 6, 7, 1. 1, 2, 3, sharp 4. This tells me that my sharp 4 is here in relation to my root. And my third is here. So I can improvise like this. I can emphasize that sharp 4 should I desire, and I can switch between them, which is what I'm going to do. So let's throw a track on, and we're going to improvise. We're going to start with C major, and you're going to take a turn as well. So starting with C major, or C Ionian if you prefer, we get something that sounds like this. Here's the big gain sound, and I'll turn this up a little bit as well. So I'm going to play some stuff, and then I'm going to leave you a space. So I might play this. Go to my next one. You take a turn. This is C major. In a moment, we're going to switch to C Lydian, and I'll cue you off for that, right? I'm going to cue you off. We're going to switch back in tracks, but it'll be the same style track, same tempo. We're not going to change styles. All we do is take the 4 and we move it up by a semitone. That's it. All we do, right? Only change we make. Let's change tracks from C major to C Lydian. Same thing. There's another C. Take a turn with C Lydian. It's the same thing, but just take all the 4s and push them up by 1 semitone. So all you got to do, 1 note changes. That is it. It's the whole difference. I'm sure that's sounding killer, so we're going to stop that there. Now, Now, this is, to my mind, the way to visualize this stuff. It is the way to visualize this stuff because we get Devin Townsend jams from my friend James, big strong James, from the C Lydian jam for sure, 100%, right? It's like big heavy guitars and lovely ambient stuff. It's a recipe for some Devi. Now, that is how this stuff goes together. But of course, these are not the only places that we can find these notes. This is just what happens when we put the root note on our first finger. But we can put the root note in other places. What if we took a root note and put it on our pinky finger, right? So here's a pinky finger root. Well, now we can start to populate some other notes from our root note. There are other places we can play this, but with the pinky on the root, we could do this. Now we know if we're playing major, again in C, that the root note is here and the major 7th is a semitone below. We know that the 4th is the same fret, next string. Now, would you look at that? I have accidentally stumbled my way into the major 3rd. The major 3rd, semitone below the 4th. Or it's this shape. Now, how might I have found that shape? Well, here's a fun way of figuring it out. If my root note is here, and my major 3rd is normally here, to find the same note on the next string, we go back 5 frets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the way the guitar's tuned. you tune notes 5 frets apart. So any note that's here, you can also find here, 5 frets apart. There's my major third. There's fourth, major third, major 7. I can play my second here. Why is it here? Because the second, 2 frets below the third. There's my 6th. Why did I know that was the 6th? Well, here's the reason why I knew that was the 6th. Because here's root, here's 7. This next note is the flat 7. How do I know it's flat 7? Well, because the 7 can either be a 7 or a flat 7. And it has to go somewhere. And a flat 7 is defined by being 2 frets or 2 tones below a root, which means the next one's probably going to be the 6. And if I wanted a flat 6, it'd be below that. So there we go. Root, 7, 6. 2, 3, 4. Where might the 5 be? Well, the 5's normally here. 5 frets apart, it's here. And I could play my 7 here. And my root note could be here. Would you look at that? That's the start of this one. They are all interconnected. All of these are interconnected in a way that is shockingly simple when you start to break them down. Now, this is where I bust out the master shape, because there is one shape that these major scale modes in particular follow. We call this the master shape. I call this the master shape. Now, in terms of figuring out how to use the master shape, this begins by figuring out a small octave of the scale. You figure out an octave, and that tells you where you are in the master shape. But the master shape is this. Here are 3 fingering patterns you're going to need. There's this one, which looks like something off Star Trek. There's this one, which also looks like something off Star Trek. And there's this one that really looks like something off Star Trek. But what they are is 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4, and stretchy shapes. We've already played stretchy shapes in abundance. Let's begin with a stretchy shape on our root note. And a stretchy shape on our root note in this case, we could play, if we were going to do, let's go back to A for argument's sake, we could play one here. Right, so there's an A. For A major, there's a stretchy shape. Why is it stretchy? Because there is a space between these 2 notes and these 2 notes. There's another one here. There are always 3 stretchy shapes next to each other. Notice I've hidden my 3rd finger for this. There are always 3 of these. Always 3, and they are always next to each other. When we get below these, we now get into playing 2 lots of this shape, which is 1, 3, 4. Notice I've hidden my 2nd finger. How do we know when to switch to those? Well, we've already established that we've got 2 of these, and we know there isn't another one because we know we're going to have to play something else here, which means because there's always 3, there's going to be one below. 3 stretchies. Always 3 stretchies. Every time. Here, 1, 3, 4s. 2 of them. Once we've played 1, 3, 4s, we played 2 of them. Then we play 1, 2, 4. 2 of those. If we had enough strings, we'd play 2. This little sequence of 3 of these, 2 of these, 2 of these, 3 of these, 2 of these, 2 of these, repeats infinitely. Not just in the major scale, but in every major scale mode. All of them. Regardless of what your starting octave is. Now this gives you power, because what it enables you to do is once you figure out what your starting octave is, it will give you an indication of where you are in the master shape. It gives you the capacity to restart the master shape in different octaves, but it also gives you the capacity to play through the master shape and get all of the scale notes across all of the strings should you desire. Let's show you what that looks like, right? So we're going to take C Lydian again, right? C Lydian is here. There is my C note. I'm playing 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. This has told me where I am in the master shape because I've played one of these and then one of these, which tells me that I'm on the first of 2 of these. And this is the highest of 3 of these. Why 3? Because there are always 3. Every time. Every time. I'm now on to 2 of these. Because I've played 2 of them, the next ones are going to be 2 of these. And wouldn't you know, that's correct. There's my Lydian shape. Let's take that same approach and put the octave here. There's my root note. There's the sharp 4 telling me to do one of these, which means I know I'm on to the first of 2. Here I'm playing this one. There's going to be 3 of them. Once I've done 3 of them, we're on for 2 of these. The reason we can't see this master shape is because you never get all 7 all at once, unless you're playing a 7-string guitar. 3 of these, 2 of these, 2 of these. That's 7 in total. We've only got 6 strings. The fact that we can't see it all laid out before us is what prevents us from visualizing this. And this is something that when you play this stuff, you develop an instinct for. I never think about these shapes. But I'm able to play through them on pure instinct. What I think about is where is my root note? What is my formula? If the root note is C and it's here, and I'm playing Lydian, I'm immediately going, okay, cool, well I need sharp 4s, I need major 3rds, I need major 7s, everything else is static apart from, or major rather, apart from the sharp 4. This is how I visualize this stuff. And I think this is how everybody who really knows how to do this stuff visualizes this stuff. And if you want a more in-depth look at this, a feature-length look at this, you can go and check out the course that we have linked in the description. It is my Fretboard Freedom Master Plan. It is available on licklibrary.com, right? That's where we go and find it. To this end, let's throw the Lydian backing track on, and we're gonna navigate this together, right? So grab your guitars, we are gonna jam, right? Here we go. Let's start by picking a C. Any C will do, but I'm gonna pick this one. I need a sharp 4. I know it's here. How do I know it's here? Well, I know my 4 is here, and the sharp 4 is a semitone above. I know that's my 5 because it's power chord shape. I know the 6 is 2 above my 5. I know I can get a major 3rd, 2 notes below my sharp 4. I can get a 2 here, another 3 here. There's another C, there's a 7, 2, sharp 4. What am I playing here? Well, look, there's a C. There's my 5 below. I happen to know that's the sharp 4 because it's relative to this C. Oops. I is always on the octave. and so on and so forth. This is how it's all constructed, and I'm going to ask you to take a turn. So, backing track's rolling, grab your guitars. I want you to find your way around the C Lydian scale. Take as long as you need for this, right? We've got a nice long backing track, we're not going anywhere. We're going to take some questions after this, by the way. If you have questions, drop them in the comments, because we want to hear from you, right? We want to hear from you. But a great one from Justin Ray. We're going to get into that in a second. So hopefully, this is starting to crystallize for you. It's starting to make sense. There are other scales we can do with this as well, but those are things we can talk about another time. We talked a lot about pentatonic last week, for example. I'm going to go back to my C Lydian, and I might play this. I'll play it again. When I'm playing that stuff, I am not thinking about the scale shape. I'm thinking about my little formula, where my roots are, finding pathways through the scale, hitting the notes in my formula, why do my fingers know exactly where to go? Because it's the master shape. The master shape is there whether we like it or not. In the same way the cage shapes are there whether we like them or not. I can play that all the time, right? All the time. All the time. But I can play it all day if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stop the track because it's a really fun track, but that's to serve the demonstration here. We've got some questions, so I'm going to answer as many of them as we can. We're going to start with this one from our friend Raphael, or Raphael, because it is important and it is pertinent. He says, then the master shape is always there in any scale, major, minor, diminished, not diminished. Now, this is where things change, but there is a master shape for every scale. The master shape we're talking about here is the master shape for the major scale and its modes. So that's major scale, it's Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, mixed Lydian, Aeolian, Locrian, which are very common scales. There is another master shape for pentatonic scales, for example, and there is yet another master shape for diminished scales, let's say, and whole tone scales. Those are a different beast, but they're also constructed of formulae. So when we think of the formula, we can easily populate a formula to create, say, for example, let's take a harmonic minor scale of some description, right? Let's take Phrygian dominant. Phrygian dominant will populate like this. So Phrygian dominant is a fun scale. The reason I picked this one is I don't want to do anything crazy for any folks who are going to be sat going half whole what now? Phrygian dominant formula is 1, flat 2, 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, root. 1, flat 2, 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, root. Flat 2, flat 6, flat 7 is the way to think about it. 2, 6, 7, those are flat. Here's C. There's flat 2. There's flat 7. 3, 4, 5. Flat 6. And so on and so forth. This formula style thinking works provided you know the formula. If we were to do something like a diminished scale, the formula would be different because the diminished scale is made up of a different series of intervals than the major scale and its modes. I'll give you an example of the master shape for pentatonic though, because pentatonic is quite good fun. So if we take minor pentatonic and we take C minor pentatonic as our example, what we can do is we can take, say this. Let's say we take this C here to create box number 1. Now what we get is we get this combination of big shapes and small shapes. big shapes being 3 frets, small shapes being 2 frets. The master shape for pentatonic scales is 2 big shapes, 3 small shapes, every time. Here's box 1. 2 big shapes, 3 small shapes, back into big shape, land. Let's do the next box. There's a small shape, 2 big shapes, 3 small shapes. Next shape. There's the 2 big shapes. If we had enough strings, we'd have 3 small shapes, 3 small shapes. Next shape, 2 big shapes, 1, 2, 3 small shapes, back into big shapes. Next shape, 2 big shapes are in the middle, which means we have small shapes either side. If we had enough strings, we'd have 3 of them. That's the pentatonic master shape. For major pentatonic, the root note is first finger on the upper of the big shapes. For major pentatonic, pinky finger is the root note on the upper of the 2 big shapes. That's it. Always, every time. Now, here's a great question from Mal Riley saying, after knowing all the mode formulas and how to play them, play their scales, you don't need to think about the formulas much because you know the patterns of each. Well, here's the thing, right? So you carry the formula in your mind, but you don't need to populate the formula on the fretboard, if that makes sense. You don't need to visually populate the formula on the fretboard because you have an instinct for how that pattern plays out because you've played it enough. But you carry the formula in your mind as a sound and as a recipe. Now, when we consider a recipe for any, let's say, for example, any of our English friends who make tea, right? You make the recipe for tea, and we just know the recipe for tea instinctively. We can think of tea, and we know what tea means to us in terms of hot water, tea bag, milk, potentially sugar, if that's your thing, potentially not milk, potentially it's a nice herbal tea with a slice of lemon. Whatever that means to you, that is the recipe. You think of the single single concept, which you can then kind of, I guess, expand out like an exploded diagram into its ingredients if you wanted, and then you can also think of the location if you have to. It gives you this ability to kind of zoom in and out of layers of complexity, if that makes sense. Response Audio saying this is definitely a video I'll have to revisit. Hey, you know, it's going to be here. If you guys want to catch it on the replay, it's going to be on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe because then you'll be able to find it again. But also, if you want more info on this, we've got a full course on this approach that takes you from first principles, from here is a note, through to these big fretboard shapes. And it is the Fretboard Freedom Master Plan. It's available to Lick Library members at the link down below. I'm pretty sure you can buy it in the store as well, but it's definitely available to members. If you remember, you get it as part of your membership. You don't have to pay any extra for it because you don't have to pay any extra for any of the courses, I don't think. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Our friend Steve-O Waddell says, I recognize that guitar. That's a lovely guitar. Says, patterns are king. You are correct. We are pattern-based life forms, and the guitar is a pattern-based instrument. Justin Ray says, I feel like stretchy 124 is very stable, but that might be a learned stability. How would stretchy 134 fare against stretchy 124? I think, okay, we're going to get into semantics here, but if we look at the hand, right, specifically my hand, because I have quite disproportionate fingers. I have a very long third finger and quite a small fourth finger that's set quite far back in the knuckle line. So we've got these knuckles here and this one's set a little further back. Weirdly, it's not the same on this hand, but on this fretting hand, that's where it is. So I've got quite a big gap between the length of my ring finger and the length of my pinky finger. I think the reason 124 is stretchy is because the first and second fingers are long and the stretch between them is smaller. Whereas the distance between the long ring finger and the short pinky finger feels subjectively further. But then again, we play this all the time. And Paul Gilbert is quite happy doing all these shapes. I went through a period of time when in my own playing where I was trying to standardize this stuff and I was trying to play some shapes with 134s because they were more convenient to reach with the than the 124 for whatever reason. I ultimately abandoned that idea. It became an idea that was consigned to the ideas graveyard. And I think that's kind of important because the ideas graveyard, you know, hey, you got to have ideas, you got to test stuff and they don't all make it. I think a big part of intellectual honesty is knowing when one of your ideas is Yeah, even if you're stuck with it for a while, you go, nah, it's not really it. And you can abandon it. I think that's important, and I don't think there's any shame in that. But yeah, I did try and standardize it for a while in a desire to standardize the guitar's fretboard. Didn't really work out for me, but I will still play with that shape if something calls for it. But I think generally speaking, that is a better option for most folks. And I use Paul Gilbert as an example here because he's kind of the exception rather than the rule. And Paul Gilbert's fingers are a foot long. Like each one of them is like a hot dog in length. It's crazy, right? If you've ever met Paul, he has like the equivalent of an extra joint on each of his fingers. It's like the face hugger from Alien. It's massive. And I'm quite a tall person. I'm like sniff under 6'3", and I've got quite big hands. Even for my height, my fingers are quite long. I am dwarfed by Paul, both in height and in hand size. Dude's got like the biggest hands you've ever seen. They're like clown hands. It's crazy. So I think anything Paul can do with this stretch, we shouldn't extrapolate out to ourselves. But at the same time, one of the best players I know has very small hands. I keep coming up with, I keep throwing like Tom under the bus here. It's Tom Quayle. I keep using him as my example of somebody with small hands, but he's got a huge stretch. He can stretch further than me, despite having comparatively small fingers, and does wild things with stretches between these two, specifically in these big stretch pentatonic shapes that he likes. So I guess learned is probably the way to think about it, if that makes sense. Anyway, let's see if we've got any more questions. We've got loads coming in. Warren DeMartini, now, there's an underrated player. We were talking about Prince before, being an underrated player. I think Prince is now a formerly underrated player, and now people get it. And now he's just a rated player. But Warren, very much an underrated player now. And Jake and Lee as well, right? Jake gets around. I was watching a lot of Jake videos today. Jake gets around it by doing this, though. And I think you can train flexibility in the hand. You can train flexibility in most of your joints, let's say. You know, if you wanted to train to do a full split, you could do it eventually. Flexibility is or mobility, which is the ability to actually be strong in positions rather than just get into them passively. These are qualities that you can train for. You just need to gradually expose yourself to this sort of thing. But yeah, Jake's a great shout. And again, very underrated guitar player, as is Warren. Did you notice, by the way, for you Warren fans, so you noticed that in the first album he sounded loads like George Lynch, and then he toured with George Lynch and all of a sudden didn't sound like George anymore and started sounding like Eddie Van Halen. It's crazy. But obviously he sounds like Warren because he's Warren, and Warren's got this lovely, beautiful thing going on. But still, kind of interesting, if that makes sense. He has a great one, talking about Tom. Tom has a very smart way of expanding and contracting his hands and visualizing fingerings. Now, that's something him and David Beebe talk about. They have this mechanical language of expansion and contraction, which is really interesting, and it's something that I probably need to spend a bit more attention to, but I think I'm dealing with big hand privilege. If that makes sense, because it's not something I've ever really had to think about, apart from on the rare occasion when I have to actually really reach for something. And even then, it's not like a big monster stretch. So yeah, speaking from a position of privilege here, folks, we've run out of time. Again, I could sit and do this all day, right? I could sit all evening and chat with you guys, but unfortunately, our hour together has elapsed. Now, I want to remind you, these lessons are brought to you by licklibrary.com, and you can go and get more information in the Fretboard Freedom Master Plan. It is our featured course, right? It's available to Lick Library members. If you want to buy it, link down below. If you want to sign up for a Lick Library membership and get the course as part of the membership, link down below. The membership's a bargain, by the way, considering how much you get. It's bonkers. I don't think there's a proposition like this in the market. It is crazy. In the meantime, folks, I'm going to bid you adieu. Don't forget to subscribe to whichever channel you're watching on, because we do this every week, and we'd like to let you know when we're about to go live. So hit the bell icon so you don't miss one of these. My name's Nick Jennison. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been the Monday Guitar Show. I think we'll play out on some more Lydian, because Lydian is fun. See how many of these tropes you can spot in this outro solo. Wish me luck with this blue guitar. It's fighting me today, but that's part of the fun. I'll see you guys next week. Let's Lydian.